And not necessarily, in this case, like pitching any sort of business or anything like that. It's really just helping them understand the pros and cons to a particular solution strategy or method. And then once they've sort of decided, you know what, I need to outsource, in this case, like you're right, like I need to outsource my IT option, like I need some sort of solution that's outside of the company, this is where you come in with content that's more helping them make a decision. This is where you can come at them with case studies of your business. This is where you can start to do vendor comparison. This is where you can talk about like the key things you should look for in an IT managed service and the pros and cons of all those different packages. So case studies or live demos, or you know, if it's a product and not a service, maybe it's product literature, product demos. Excuse me. Does this make sense for everyone? And this actually makes it a lot better to do what I would call like the actual content creation process, the nuts and bolts of it. Because it helps you narrow it down to specific keywords or topics. Right? How many times, like if you know, have to write a piece of content that's super generic, like even the concept of like IT managed service, if I had to write an ebook on IT managed service, I think I would go insane. There's so many different things you can talk about, as boring as the topic that is, apologies. But like having some focus, like knowing that I'm trying to help people evaluate vendors for IT managed services makes it dramatically easier to talk about the specific things that are within that subtopic. And it also helps me, this is where your persona comes in, because now you're starting to use language that's very targeted to the way that they express those evaluations. So one of the ways that you can do this is, so I'm going to switch examples, and we're going to talk about the campaign goal that I had set at the very beginning, right? So I want to attract more people to my offsite business travel company. So I have here offsite travel as a particular keyword. I have team building. I have empowering employees. I'm just trying to build awareness for the possibility of offsite travel as an option for creating, you know, better team building activities. So I built this ebook that basically talks about how to empower your employees through offsite travel. So I'm using the kinds of words that like an HR person would be looking for, or like a manager would be looking for when they're trying to bring their team together, right? But I targeted that persona, and then I picked content, I picked the stage of the content that I wanted it to be, and then I picked the keywords within that stage and for that persona. Does that make sense? So let's talk a little bit, so let's assume that I've actually gone through and created this, and it's not just a beautiful little screenshot on this PowerPoint. At a certain point, it's like, okay, you've done the work of creating the content, like now you actually have to create the channels and the methods for people to get it. So before we dive into this, I wanted to so this is where we can do a little exercise on content offers. So all of these worksheets and websites we'll be sending out after the fact, but if you want to take a few minutes to think through, we'll just walk through this one together for a second. So, you know, take a minute and like think about one of the personas that you just spent a couple minutes brainstorming, and choose the sort of skill level for that individual, more or less, and think of that topic or keyword, or think of that, like what stage they're in the buyer's journey. So once you sort of narrowed it down in those kinds of ways, choose a format. Think of like, do I want to do something that's a piece of content they can download? Or do I want to do like a webinar or a video? Or do I want to do, you know, a checklist? Or do I want to do a piece of like a more, you know, longer form piece of content, like a piece of literature? And then from there, think about how are you going to, like now you've sort of thought about the format, you know, how you're going to present that content. Then think about how you're going to structure the content. Is it going to be, you know, is it going to be helpful? Is it going to be tips? Is it going to be more of an analysis? Is it going to help them, is it going to be more Q&A form, you know, structured? This should kind of help you narrow down some of the different ways that you want to set the content, and then at that point you can brainstorm a title.
I have a quick question. I don't see a shelf life on there.
We'll talk about shelf life in a second, but that's a great point. A lot of these times, so for campaigns, shelf life is an interesting concept because you're going to spend a lot of time building this piece of content. It takes time. You know, you can't like draft something in a few hours and be done with it. The idea is you want to make that time worth it. So you have a couple of approaches. If it's something that can be what we call evergreen content, where it's not really time sensitive and it's content that it can have a second life, then that's great, right? Sometimes, like, those are the best types of campaigns because you'll have a targeted campaign around that topic, you know, for that specific time frame, but then you can reuse some of that content maybe, you know, later down the line if you want to just try to keep pushing a little bit of awareness to those pieces of content, or you could repurpose some of that content for a different campaign or for some other purpose, right? Other times it's useful to focus on campaigns that are timely, right? So, for example, you know, Jennifer does campaigns to promote the hug events. Those are obviously time sensitive because those hug events are taking place within a specific time and place, right? But she could, theoretically, she could target all of her campaign content around this time and place. And then if there's some snippets of like timeless material, like lessons or topics, she could reuse some of that and package it for another time. Like she could write a blog post about it, or retrospective or something like that. But it wouldn't be part of the campaign. It would just be a way of extending the shelf life of the campaign a little bit. Does that make sense for everyone? I find it a little helpful to first start with the content. Otherwise, if you're thinking about the shelf life, well, while you're drafting the content, you're kind of putting the cart before the horse. Because you got to have something to work with first, and then you can sort of figure out what to do with it after. But it's a great question. So let's assume that you've brainstormed a piece of content, so you know who your audience is, you know what your goal for your campaign is. You have now a central piece of content. Now is where things start to get a little interesting because now you have to sort of go to where buyers actually like inhabit. And in this particular case, inhabit is the web. And there's a variety of different channels that they're going to be sort of in. Right? So one of the exercises that we did with the persona was what tools do they use? What website, where do they get their information, right? So maybe you might find that for your specific persona, where they get their information is in LinkedIn. That's where they spend a lot of their time. Maybe they're a recruiter, right? And so they spend a lot of their time on LinkedIn, but they don't spend a ton of their time on Twitter and Facebook. Maybe they are a person who spends a lot of time just Google searching. So you know that you want to take more of an organic content strategy. And so knowing where your personas go to search for information and knowing what kinds of places and tools they use is going to help you narrow down a set of actions, those organized actions, to target that audience. So the key thing about an offer, right, so we built that piece of content, there's a transaction that needs to happen, right? You're not just gonna put it on your website available for everybody. I mean, you could do that, and that would be very generous of you. But you'd want to create some sort of opportunity for an exchange, where you could create a point of engagement is another way to say it. So it's helpful to kind of start at the end, right? The end goal is for somebody to get the piece of content. But in order for them to get the piece of content, they need to convert somewhere on your website, right? Exchange a little bit of information and get that piece of content, right? So that's, in this particular example, it's a landing page. How many people here are familiar with, have built a landing page? Okay. So for those of you in the room that haven't built a landing page is just a web-based form. It's a website page with a form on it, and there's a few questions on there that you'll use and then you'll provide the offer in exchange for that information. And they're really useful. And there's a couple things about landing pages. One, they serve as a promotion for that piece of offer that you just draft it, right? They're helping to sell it a little bit. Why would you want this? Why would you even bother giving us your information in exchange for it? And the quick tip to a landing page is to stick to the 3 B's. You know, brevity, benefits, and bullets. Right? Just help us understand what I'm going to get out of this ebook. Tell me as briefly as possible, and from a formatting perspective, in bullets, it's like a lot easier to read. But once you've created that landing page, we have to think about, well, how are people going to get to that landing page? Because that landing page is going to be like the collection point, if that makes sense. So here's where we think about, okay, all the different places that people go, right? And like we mentioned, some people may go here, some people may go to all of them, some people may only go to some. But the key is understanding where they go, and then creating those channels that bring them into that content offer. So a few examples is we have here, it's a little grainy, but we have a Facebook post, right? So this is just a Facebook post with a link to the landing page. It's got an image, right, as a way to like attract. It's basically a call to action, but it's a little deconstructed because it fits this channel. Right? And then that link brings somebody to the landing page, which if they download, brings them to get access to the ebook. Easy peasy. Let's look at some other examples. So this is a Facebook example. They see the offer on Facebook, they go to the landing page, they download the offer. In this case, they're on your website. Maybe they're on your blog, maybe they're on just a general page on your site. They see a call to action, right? They see the call to action, they go to the landing page, they download the offer. Or maybe they got an email from you. And so they get an email, they click the link, they go to the landing page, they download the offer. The key here is I use 3 examples. I use social media. For social media, I use Facebook, but you could easily use a tweet, right? Which is, just a little line of text with maybe an image, potentially. Or you could use a call to action on your site, or you could use an email. There's other things that I haven't talked about, like you could use a guest post on a site that they frequent. Maybe there's a periodical or like a website where everybody in that industry goes. And maybe there's a link in that blog post to the landing page, which then they can download to the ebook. So there's a couple different ways. The key is knowing your persona, because that helps you narrow down what's going to be most effective, instead of just checking every single thing off the list for the sake of doing it. And then the final point is, on the promotion side, is spending as much time promoting it as you did creating it. So in this example, I showed you one Facebook post, I showed you one email, and I showed you one call to action. But that Facebook post shouldn't be the only Facebook post that you do promoting that content offer. Maybe you experiment with different times of the day, with different days of the week, and with different language, right? So you have a lot of stuff that you probably have collected as part of your buyer persona research that you can use, and you can tweak a lot of the language describing the content offer and test out a bunch of different things. And the same thing goes for, if you're sending an email, obviously maybe you segment to your database to a very small list and you send them one email, but then you are emailing a different audience and they would benefit from, within that persona, and you tweak the language and send it a different way, or you send it at a different time. So the key here is to think about not just promoting it one time in one channel, but rather spending as much time promoting it as you did creating it. And the last kind of process here is just reviewing how everything went and repeating, because a lot of these things, a lot of these different channels have indicators that let you know how successful they were at getting people from point A to point B, right? So in the example of social, you're looking at things like clicks and retweets and shares and likes. In the case of email, you're looking at opens and you're looking at clicks, maybe even you're looking at forwards. And then in the case of calls to action, you're looking at views and you're looking at clicks. And those all serve to help you kind of gauge the relative reach of that campaign. How many people potentially saw or were aware of that campaign? And then you can use the landing page as sort of, okay, from all those people that saw or interacted with this offer, or just with the sort of the promotion of this offer, how many people actually got to the actual landing page? And you can look at visits, or you can look at how many contacts it generated, so how many people actually filled out the form and became contacts, and then you can look at that ratio, and it can help you understand maybe the way to make that campaign more successful next time is to tweak the language on the landing page. Instead of, maybe you got a lot of people on the landing page, but you got a lot of people who dropped off. So maybe there was a disconnect in the way that you were explaining or promoting the offer throughout those different channels. And the thing to keep in mind is, it's possible that you're not going to get it right the first time. If it's your first time building an inbound campaign, coming out of the gate and saying like, my goal is that I want to have like 300 customers by next month or whatever. I mean, sometimes that's just not, you learn what's realistic over time is my point. And the key is to collect all of that data, but use that data to help you iterate and make improvements in the campaign. And sort of you go through that process long enough and you start to figure out what works for your business. And then just when you start figuring out what works for your business, your customers start to change and you have to try it all over again. But if you have fun figuring it out, then, that's what's worth it. So I have some helpful resources at the end of this deck, and then I'm also sending this. Jennifer's going to do a blog post where she'll post the slides. If you have any questions, you can, I'm going to be around for a little bit. You can tweet me at Amanda Lucia. Jennifer has tweeted me a bunch on the Houston Hug Twitter handle, so follow Houston Hug on Twitter so that you can get in touch with me. And if there's anything I can help you guys out with, let me know.